and welcome to the second in a three-part series about team-based learning. We are fortunate to have Dr. Kathleen Irwin facilitating these sessions. She is well-versed in the pedagogy of TBL and is here to share her wisdom with us. So let's welcome her and jump right in.
Hello. I see some familiar faces and then a few new folks. I am going to do this session a little differently than the last one if you attended that. I'm actually not going to demonstrate TBL because there's just a lot of information I want to get through today. If you were here for my first session, we actually, broke into teams and took a test, and we're not going to do those things today. But I am going to spend a little bit of time just doing a quick refresher on what is TBL in case you're brand new. And then I want to focus my time and attention today and your attention on how do we manage the expectations of our students? How do we get them to buy in to TBL? Because it's very important. And I have learned this the hard way. So I'm going to tell you, I'm going to share some information about what I do, but I'm also going to share with you information that I've gotten from other experts that have been doing this longer than me. You were given some pre-reading. I'm not testing you on it today, but just in case you thought I might. Some of the things that I'm going to talk about today, Peter Balin is the lead author on that piece. I've seen him demonstrate his class. It's pretty funny. We're not going to do exactly what he does, but that just gives you some more information to consider. I mean, he actually does things where they write things on pieces of paper and then they throw it to the front of the room, and then it's very interactive. I haven't tried that myself yet, so I didn't want to try to demo it. I mean, I've only done it as a participant, but you think creatively. I'm just going to give you a few ideas, and there are other ideas certainly to be explored. But just a little, quick recap about what TBL is. It is a kind of a structured methodology to approaching learning using teams. It is more structured than, say, just the flipped classroom or collaborative learning or cooperative learning. It was very much kind of a regimented methodology. People use it to differing degrees. I may use it for an entire class. I've talked to some folks that say were in the nursing profession that had certain days where they incorporated TBL sessions. So you don't have to do it, you don't have to go all in. I went all in, and I'm still learning. There are key components. First of all, orientation, and that's what we're going to spend a lot of time talking about today. Second would be strategically formed permanent teams, and those are the two things that we're really going to talk about today. There also is then the readiness assessment process where you make sure that individuals are ready to work on application, because we want to spend our time in the classroom as the experts working on the application of knowledge. We need to think about what we want our students to be able to do when they leave, not just what they need to know. So that's really kind of changing the mindset. So when you look at your learning objectives, and we use a lot of backwards design. These are things that we'll talk more about in the next PDS that we're going to do. But I've focused on my learning objectives in a way that I never have before. So I really had to hone in on what do I really want these students to be able to do when they leave with the knowledge that they acquire. And where's the best use of my time? Part of what we've got them to help them learn is understand where's the best use of their time and what's their responsibility. We also use then most of our class time for team application exercises where they're doing higher order critical thinking within teams and then being able to share across teams. There's certain guiding principles for how you accomplish that. Like I said, that's beyond what we're doing today. And then finally, peer evaluation. And I'm going to touch on that too because that's a part of the student buy-in and the student involvement in this process. So 4 essential elements, according to Sweet and Michelson. Larry Michelson is really kind of known as the father of TBL. He really began developing this technique in the 70s at University of Oklahoma, teaching management. Since then, it's been taught internationally. It is taught across disciplines. The health sciences in particular have really embraced TBL. But according to him, essentially, you must have properly formed and managed teams. It's very important. Students obviously need to be motivated to come prepared. How do we get our students to read before they come? We hope they will, but how many of you have ever looked out and asked questions and seen blank faces? I'm sure all of your students always come prepared, right? Okay, mine don't. So we get those blank stares. How do we motivate them to come prepared? And then learning to use those concepts. It's not just about acquiring the knowledge. How do they use that? How do they develop as professionals? And then finally, they've got to be accountable. They've got to be accountable. So how do we get our students ready for this? First of all, I do want you to stop for a moment and think about this. Why are you using or want to use TBL? Why are you interested in it? Write that down. Think about it for just a second. This is one of the most important things for you in getting ready to orient your students. Why are you doing it? For me personally, I was going to participate in the easel classroom. I was one of the first. So I started learning about active learning, and I discovered this technique, and it just really resonated with me. I wanted to develop critical thinking skills. I wanted my students to be engaged in meaningful discussion. I liked the structure of it. I liked the fact that there was kind of almost a formula that I could follow. But I did want them to have discourse. I didn't want to just stand there and lecture and then regurgitate knowledge at me. So those are some of the reasons that I engaged. Anybody want to share why they're interested, or maybe? Yes.
There are some tools that I want my students to become proficient with, not just familiar with. They've got to use them. They've got to have enough repetition and understanding of them to be able to continue to use them throughout their profession.
Mm-hmm. They have to experience it. Right. Do you? No.
I teach writing, so after this writing course, most of them won't ever have to take another English course. So this models how you actually get feedback on your writing and improve once you get out of a classroom.
Right. Others?
So I'll be teaching med students over at VCOM, and they need to know how to apply this knowledge. They also need to know how to work in groups as far as healthcare goes. So I mean, it's a perfect fit. And they need to know how to, learn information on their own as far as those lower levels.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah. So we promote, one thing that we all promote, and certainly in my discipline, is lifelong learning. How do they learn? Teaching them how they learn. So I think that TBL gives us the opportunity, and the orientation to TBL gives us an opportunity to help students begin to understand how they learn. Maybe something they've never thought about. They've sat in a classroom, they've been lectured to, they've memorized, they've written an essay, they've regurgitated. And they may have done some group work, but we really want to move them to that higher order thinking. So why is it important that we orient them? It's different. They're going to be resistant. They have to work. They're going to have to work not harder, but more and more on the front end than they're used to, probably. They've typically been very passive learners. Tell me what I need to know. I've been taught to the test. They are taught to the test from the time they start kindergarten, because they're being assessed all along the way with multiple choice tests, right? Taught to the test. Maybe they've had bad experiences with group work, and there are things about TBL that helps eliminate some of the problems that they've experienced in the past with, the freeloaders that never show up, they don't really contribute. There's always that one person that does all the work. And contrary to that, there's that one person who takes charge and tries to do all the work, but the rest of the group members are going, whoa, wait a minute, we've got something to contribute to. It's not always just freeloaders that are a problem, right? At the end of the semester, when you get your evaluations, I guarantee you someone will say, I had to teach it to myself. Guess what? You've always done that. Learning occurs outside the classroom, right? The bulk of learning occurs outside the classroom, and students may not make that connection. So this is an opportunity to teach about how they learn and to prepare them. So we want 3 goals. We want them to be oriented. They need to be convinced of why this is important for them to do. Why is TBL going to be a good way of presenting this class? They've also got to be convinced that the way we structure the class is going to alleviate their concerns they have about letting go I know over in the med school, one of your colleagues, Courtney, is talking about you've got type A high achievers that they don't trust that the next person's going to do as well as they are. You know, you may have low achievers. Now, TBL does show that it really helps those people that are a little bit are underachievers to step their game up. The high achievers are going to do well. They're always going to do well. This really does help others to kind of step up. But we don't want the high achievers to think that they're going to pull everybody's weight. They also need to be introduced to the processes. They need to have a clear understanding why we're doing this, how this is going to work, and you know, you can overcome resistance over time. Some of them will jump in whole hog. Some of them will not. So it's a lot of work on our end, but it's fun work. It's engaging. It's different work. Preparing a lecture is a lot of work. This is a lot of work because you're preparing not to lecture. So you're having to create engaging exercises and you're having to spend, but I can't even tell you how exciting it is to sit in the classroom and to walk around and engage with small groups and hearing them discuss the information. Even in the testing process, when they're able to take a test together as a group and they are debating the answers, you can get a better sense of how well they understand the information at that point. I mean, it's just, there are moments, there's those little moments all along you think, this is really worth it. It was really worth it, even though I'm out of my comfort zone too, you know, and so are they. Okay, so the first class meeting, very important. Things you want to accomplish. And by the way, I'm going to make these slides available to everybody through the Big EO Center. You want to introduce TBL properly. You're going to form teams probably that day, if possible. And you're going to try it out. You're going to demonstrate it. So let's talk about introducing TBL. A lot of ways to do that. I also have a lot of handouts for y'all. I'm going to give you a bunch of material to take home with you today. They're just ideas, just some things that I've found and incorporated, and I'll point you in the direction of some others. I'm not saying that what I have is the be-all and end-all. It's just it's a jumping off point. Okay. So it's really important that you regularly and openly discuss TBL and why you're using it. And maybe not just the first day. The first day is really important, but I reiterate it throughout the semester in helping them continue to make that connection and understand what's happening with TBL. It's so important that you be very prepared for your first meeting. I mean, I think I underestimated this the first time I did it. But to come in there with a real game plan, knowing exactly what you're going to do, how you're going to do it, materials prepared, look organized, I mean, be all business. And I've gotten more organized, and I'll tell you a couple things that I do along that way. But one thing I really have started spending more time on is I want to focus on helping students figure out how they learn. I want them to think about, how do I learn? And they all learn differently, right? Different people have different learning styles. So this is similar to something what Peter Balin uses in his material, and other people use these same questions. I'm actually going to give you a list of these questions as well. This could be an application exercise, or it could be a simple poll. So I just start off by polling the group and saying, you know, think about your college education, what you're looking for. What are you looking for out of this course? Are you looking to acquire the information? Are you looking to use the information? Are you looking to develop lifelong learning skills? And you can poll the groups. You can poll individuals. You could have already formed teams at this point and be asking teams to discuss this and then to give you their answer. And then we can start talking about what their expectations are for the course. So we're talking about their course expectations. And them to think about, I don't know, why am I taking that course? Because it's required. Because it's I heard it was an easy course. It's my elective. I think this is easier than health law. All right. So then we can go a step further and talk about these are all important. And, you know, how do we accomplish each of these goals? How do we acquire information? How do we learn to use it? How do we become lifelong learners? So we can go back to those same goals now and say, okay, talk about how you can learn these. You know, how many of you think that you need to spend your time in the classroom learning all the information? ultimately what you're getting to is they are going to come to the realization that of those 3 things that you're trying to accomplish, the one that they know they can do on their own is to get the facts outside the classroom. This is where Peter Balin actually has people wad up and throw the paper to the front, and then he gets the groups to go and actually discuss this among the groups. I'm not demonstrating that for you today, but this is another way to engage them in some lively discussion to talk about what they're wanting to get out of this class. But you want them to come to the realization that I can get the facts on my own. I want to learn how to use it. I want to learn how to apply it. I can memorize. I don't need you to tell me what I need to know. Another thing I have students do now is I point them out to this learning styles inventory. It's free tool online, simple test they can take, and then they get a printout that shows them on 4 different scales kind of where they fall in terms of their learning styles. I will give you that information today too, so they can find out for themselves. Maybe they've never thought about it. I'm more of an experiential learner. I'm a sensory learner. They start to learn about learning. And also they can share that in their groups and find out how their other group members learn. So that's another great tip or tool that I've learned to use. People like to learn about themselves. We're all selfish creatures, right? Don't you love to take personality tests? Am I the only one? How many of you are on Facebook? How many of you take click into those crazy little surveys to find out about yourself? What's my Partridge Family name? People, the kids like this too. Our students like this. I call them all kids. They might not be kids. Learning about ourselves. So I think becoming self-aware. So this actually delves over into something called emotional intelligence. How many of you are familiar with emotional intelligence, EQ? There is data that shows that EQ is a better predictor of success than is IQ. And part of EQ is being self-aware. And other things are having empathy and understanding other people. So think of this also, this may sound like a bunch of junk, but think of it in terms of I am helping them to develop emotional intelligence. And there's not a field in here, I'm sure, that doesn't have something in their field where they've seen a session on emotional intelligence. I know in healthcare, we see it a lot. So certainly our future nurses and doctors need to develop emotional intelligence. This is an opportunity to go in that direction. So think of that among your learning objectives, emotional intelligence, the self-awareness, learning about myself, learning about others, learning that others are different, learning how to work with others and respect our differences and understand that we sometimes, if I'm an extrovert versus an introvert, extroverts, we like to brainstorm and we're just blah, 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 we talk. Introverts are thinking. And then by the time they're ready to share something, we've moved on to item number 3 on the agenda. And the introvert had something really great to share, but we didn't create the space and give them the opportunity to participate. These are the kinds of skills that they're going to try to develop over the course of their profession. So let's start now. Okay, so I do a basic introduction to what is TBL. Just like if I did a TBL 101 seminar in here for you, like I've done before, I talk about the different aspects of it. Jim Sibley is one of the big gurus of this. He gives a handout. I have this information, probably not to this extent in my syllabus. I'm going to give you a copy of his handout where he lays this out. I put it in my syllabus as well, but I talk about the different components of it and how there's an individual component, how there's a team component, and I go through what the actual process is going to be in terms of them getting prepared and how they will be given readings to do, and they will come to class, they will take a test as individuals. They take the readiness assessment test, the RATs, so they learn to love the IRAT and the TRAT or the GRAT. This is what they can expect. There's going to be a module. There are going to be 5 of them this semester. You're going to have readings and I'm going to give you a reading guide. I'm going to give you a test on major concepts, not minutia of detail. And then we're going to engage in a series of application exercises. So to give them an expectation of what's coming down the pike. I'm also setting up their first RAT, because at the end of the class, we're going to use a demonstration rat on the information that we just covered in the syllabus. So that it can serve a dual purpose for us. But it is important to give them very clear expectations of what's going to happen. I'm going to talk about grade weighting later, because I also allow them to have some input into how we set the grade weighting. I use that as a demonstration of an application exercise. So I will touch on that in my orientation on the front end and say, you know, you're going to have some say in how we weight your grades, and we're going to do that at the end of this class, and you're going to be able to discuss among yourselves and come to a consensus on how you want to weight certain portions of your grade. Okay. Any questions about orientation? You'll find the way that it works for you, but it's important to set it up, to be very clear, and to be enthusiastic about it, and to be clear why you're doing it. Yes, ma'am?
Are you going to talk about how you set your teams?
I am.
Okay.
I am. So now we're going to get to the teams. How to form and build teams. Okay. In team-based learning, they're very adamant about creating teacher-created teams. You do not let students create their own teams. There's data to show that over time, outcomes are better when you have teacher-formed teams. You want to do them strategically. TBL also recommends that those teams be 5 to 7 students because of the level of complexity of the problems that you should be trying to solve together in your application exercises. I present on teaching with a lot of other colleagues here at Auburn, and there's a lot of different opinions about what size the teams should be. But this is what TBL recommends. So if this, and there are reasons behind that. So it is important you don't let students pick their friends. You also want to array your assets and your liabilities. So you have to get to know your students in some way. Or you have to come up with some criteria, if you have a general understanding of who your students are, that you can make sure that you have equally distributed the assets. So let's talk about teams. Are you familiar with Tuckman's model of the team development model? There's a reason why we keep the teams together for the entire semester too. It takes a while for a team to work through these stages to get to where they're a really high-performing team. So they go through the forming and then storming, where they're kind of working things out and overcoming conflicts and getting to know one another, and they work toward being able to create some behaviors, the norms for themselves, and then to be a really good performing team. And if you're constantly changing up the teams during the semester, you're never going to get to that level. So that's another proponent of TBL, is that you keep the team together for the entire semester. So they have the chance to really become a well-oiled team. And I've gotten great feedback from my students. They also, once they got over not being able to sit with their boyfriend or whatever, that they got to know people that they might not have gotten to know before. It also, even your students that don't like to speak in a large classroom will become comfortable in their small group because they're going to spend time getting to know the same people. That's another reason too. It helps those students that may be a little more shy to develop that comfort level and to see them speak in the small groups. I've watched this happen. I've taught these same students in 2 or 3 different classes, so I use this in one class. I know which students are the ones that sit in the back and they're hoping I don't make eye contact with them. You know, oh, don't call on me, don't call on me. I'm going to look away. And of course, I immediately call on them. I mean, just try not to make eye contact with me and I will call upon you. But when I've seen them in their small groups, they're very comfortable. So this would be, theoretically why we would want to do that. Okay, so never use student-selected teams. You want to create diverse teams. Once again, assets and liabilities, a lot of different, diversity can mean a lot of different things depending on your student body and who you're working with. You also want to make it transparent as possible, so they feel like it was fairly done.
So you're gonna say, since there's, some of you are assets and some of you are liabilities,
No, I don't say that they're assets and liabilities.
Okay.
I'm saying that to you. I do it in terms of experience level. I look at levels of experience, and I want to make sure that every team has highly experienced people and every team has people that don't have as much experience. I was just at an orientation session up at UAB, their Masters of Health Administration, actually their recruitment day. And they've moved to using, UAB as a campus has adopted TBL as their QEP. We use so many acronyms, don't we? It's almost as bad as healthcare. Their Quality Enhancement Plan is part of SACS accreditation. They use a sophisticated instrument. It's not that, but it's called CATME. There are ways of doing this online where you can form teams, where you may use a survey. They've done a good job of taking people from diverse academic backgrounds and pairing them together for teams, so that you have someone that may have come out of the biomedical sciences at the table with someone who came from finance. So they've spread their assets around that way. They may take some people who had maybe 5 years of work experience and make sure that they're equitably distributed along with the people that just finished their undergraduate degree. I do something similar where I'm going to tell you about that in just a minute, exactly what I do. Okay, but you want to avoid your pre-existing cohesive groups. If you read the research, there's differing findings about using subgroups and letting some subgroups get together. I don't even want to try to go down that path. I mean, you could read that for yourself. I'm just going to stick with the basics here. But you don't want anyone to think that any one team has a special advantage. And I've actually had to shift people around too, just because I thought my almost random distribution of assets did not work out the way I wanted it to. But I was very transparent about why I did that too. Basically, it was like I had no gender diversity on a couple of teams, because I had so I moved a couple of guys around. It seemed like all the guys ended up in one group, and everything else was all women. And I thought, no, I'm going to spread this around this way. It's the only time I've ever made any changes. Okay. I do it manually. You can also do it if you have a very large class. I've read about people that do this using a survey instrument. They might have questions and survey their students and then put their teams together that way. You could use something called CATME, C-A-T-M-E. It is an online team formation and management program. It's really interesting. I haven't used it myself. Have you used it?
I tried it. You can choose all the different questions that you want them to take.
Right, so it creates that survey for you. Yeah, I've got some information on it. I've seen it demonstrated. I just haven't done it yet, because I deal with my students. I have maybe 25 to 35 students, and I know them pretty well, and I know what they've done. But if you've got larger groups, well, the CATME might be something that you would want to look at, and because this TBL has been used in 300 and 400 lecture hall classes. Larry Michelson himself, taught huge undergraduate management sections. Okay. First of all, you've got to decide what your sorting criteria are. What are the criteria I'm going to use to kind of identify subgroups of my students? And then prioritize those. So what I do is my students have to do a semester-long internship. They intern anywhere from a local physician's office to Johns Hopkins. Some of them go to Cerner. So we have paid and unpaid. So. Then we also require students to do a big capstone project, which is basically building a physician practice from the ground up. I'm talking, from designing the building to developing the policies. It's a very complex business plan. So I start by saying, if you have completed your internship, stand up. And I have them start to line up. So you're basically creating, I've got 3 or 4 questions. I said, I want you to stand up. The first question that applies to you, I want you to get up and line up around the wall. Multiple questions may apply to you, but I just want you to get up on the first one. So I'll get my interns up, then I ask my people that are either completed capstone or in the process of completing capstone, because I know they're at the end, to get up. I then ask if they have completed my health insurance class, and then by that time I've got literally no one left. I might have a couple of juniors that are very early in the class. Then I figure out how many students I have. Divided by 5 or 6 or 7, then we have the number off. So let's say I realize that I'm going to end up, or I knew already before I got there, because I know how many students I'm going to have, that I'm going to have, roughly, I'm going to have 4 groups. So they start counting off, 1, 2, 3, 4, very scientific. Then I have the 1s get together, the 2s get together, the 3s, they go and assemble with their teams. And then I look to see what I have. But by that time, I should have a pretty equitable, it's worked out well for me. So, but those are my criteria. So you just have to think about what applies for you. It could be disciplines, it could be, I don't know, you'd have to think about, I don't know, have y'all over in the, what Courtney has done in terms of?
As far as teams?
Yes.
Yeah, we did a iClicker survey and asked about their educational backgrounds. We have some that have master's degrees, doctorate degrees, some with just bachelor degrees. So we did that, where they were from, gender, maybe one other thing.
Yeah. So so you could distribute those folks who are already in their advanced degrees with the younger, So there are a lot of ways that anybody else have if you've done this and how you've distributed your students.
I have freshmen, so they have no experience, so I do it geographically and then by discipline. So whoever's closest to Auburn lines up closest, and then we kind of go out, so then we've got at least a geographical diversity.
Yeah. Well, I guess, do you have any AP English students in your class? Yeah. Are they all AP?
No.
So you could have, if you had AP in English, you could have them as a group, stand up as a group too, so you could get those AP students distributed around, just an idea. So your groups are formed. And now they have to get to know one another. But it's been transparent. They should feel like it was equitable. It wasn't like, well, why did she put me with him? But so I was just real open and honest about it. I believe in transparency. I want to model it. Okay, then let's build some teams. Team building exercises. I spend some time helping them get to know one another. They start in that, the forming of the team. I have several different exercises. I just went out into Dr. Google and said, Dr. Google, what are some team building exercises? And I found all kinds of great, those icebreakers. You may already use some in your classes, but I tried to find some things that I thought might work well to help students get to know one another. And my students actually kind of know one another, but they don't know each other as well as you might think, even though they've taken a lot of the same classes together. And some of you, your students have never met, right? I do one thing where I help them come to a name for their team. It's called a classification exercise. So, and this is something, if we took this seminar last year, I did this. But this is a quick way where I have them start talking to one another, and I want them to introduce themselves to each other, and I want them to find some commonalities, and I want them to come up with a name for their team. And this is always fun. This is fun. They get to be a little creative. But they have to find things that, this almost might even seem a little complicated. I've kind of tweaked it over time, where they have to say, okay, there's 7 of us. Let's come up with 2 or 3 subgroups, and then let's eventually work toward one thing that we all have in common. It could be silly. I have silly names. I was in the easel classroom, and so there are colored boards all around, and the people that were sitting at the orange board came up with Orange Crush. It was that silly. And I had another group that we had an elder statesman in our faculty that was about to retire, and he was a particularly hard teacher, and they made themselves Dr. Burns' Dream Team. So we just called them the DBDTs. But he was very flattered, actually, that they were Dr. Burns' Dream Team. So this is some way they come up with a name, they introduce themselves. One thing you can have them do, and this is something what other people do, is you could then get someone from the group has to stand up, introduce all of their colleagues, and talk about what their name is. So they introduce themselves to the rest of the class. All right. So that's the fun part. Now we get into, how do I teach them about themselves? I have them take a DISC personality test. It's a very simple test, very simple. They can sit down and do it in the course of while we're sitting in class, and I've got those for you here, and also provide them with information once they have taken this little test, and they kind of see where they're, what traits stand out for them. And they can then talk about share with each other what their personality traits are. And there's a facilitation guide that I have that helps them talk about, well, what would be one of the strengths of being a dominant personality type? What might be a challenge of being a dominant personality type in group work? So they're just helping them think through themselves. Once again, I like myself. I want to learn about myself. And I want to learn about my colleagues, but also recognizing that I've always thought being the smartest person in the group was great, was the asset, and realizing that, well, you know, maybe not always, that we all have some challenges to overcome. So this is just one tool that I use. Lots of people use other tools. So the next piece is something that I use. I facilitate strategic planning for organizations. That's kind of one of my hats that I wear. I don't know how many of you have been involved in meetings where you set ground rules for your meeting. How many? Anybody? If you've been in a meeting where you had to set some ground rules for your meeting. Okay. So in strategic planning, what I will do with a group is that we will discuss the purpose of our meeting today, but I also want the group to start suggesting things about what rules do we want to operate by today in this meeting. So I do the same thing with students. It's like, let's talk about what rules that you want to operate for yourself, for your groups. And they start discussing these things, and they come up with a long list, and then I have them rank them and come up with the top 5. Well, this is the opportunity where they are talking about, you know, coming prepared to class. Because by now they know what they've got to do. Coming to meetings on time. Being respectful of one another's opinions. I mean, you might even help guide them through this, but they're talking in their small groups here. But they agree, they come to a consensus, and they are saying we will about not using not being on your cell phone when we're having a group discussion. These are the same kind of rules that we have when I'll have a board of directors sitting around a table like you are today. And we will talk about that, about in terms of being respectful, letting people speak, not being on our cell phones, showing up to class, those sorts of things. Well, after they do that, I've created this little form, and I have them fill out this form. And this little form is then going to become the stapled to, I'm not doing this equally. For the entire semester, each of them has a folder. And when I give a test or have any application exercises, I hand Team 1 or Team Orange Crush their folder. It'll open up. The materials they need for that day are in it, but this is stapled to the front, just to remind them this is what you agreed to, lest you forget. Just little tricks. I mean, this is like, Management 101 and Team Building 101. This may be new for some of them, and I'm teaching future managers. So I'm also thinking about this also in my learning objectives. What am I modeling to them? I'm modeling to them how to run meetings. There are a lot of, just think about the byproducts of things, those soft skills that they also need to be acquiring, because they all need those soft skills. If you look at anything, what employers are looking for, the soft skills are usually ranked as high or higher than the technical skills. They want communication skills. They want ability to work in teams. So these are important learning objectives too, on top of learning how to diagnose a patient or to build a flux capacitor. So I didn't give this to you earlier. I'm going to pass this around. This is that learning styles inventory that I mentioned. And these are just because I had it out of order. And when you get the slides, there's the link, so you'll be able to visit that. Take it yourself. I took it myself. It was really interesting. I enjoyed it. I'm probably making lots of noise with this. Okay. So I have an hour and 15-minute class period. The first class period, I may even run into the second class period with this. It is that important to me to set the stage and to build the team. Because if you don't take time to lay the foundation, you can't build the house. Right. Okay. So I already talked about, so I actually would flash this up on the board. I gave you a copy of it, but I would put this as a slide and direct them to do the classification exercise where they would come to their single classification and maybe name their team based on that. It doesn't have to be based on that. I talked about I would put up this slide to direct them and how I want them to, and discuss how I want them to establish ground rules or guiding principles for how they're going to proceed, and then complete their profile sheet that I just shared with you. Boom. All right. Any questions about teams? Any stories you want to share about what you've done with teams that has worked well or not worked well? Yes, ma'am.
We put 94 students into teams and they were teacher selected. No, we didn't teacher select them. We let them select.
Bad idea.
Bad idea.
I've got some problems with that because I've been using teams 12, 15 years now. And for 7 or 8 years, I created teams. I made sure that, and I'm teaching seniors, they're doing this stuff, that everything was distributed properly. Half the teams work great. The other half have got 1 or 2 people don't do anything. So it's like, okay, 1 year, it's like, you guys choose. Worked like a charm. They divided up. The best students in the class were in a team, and right on down the line. If I wanted to segregate them, I couldn't have done it any better. The best students did okay. The students in the middle rose to the top. I never would have expected it. They had never been expected to lead or to do the work. Some of the worst students, they did okay. I fully expected those teams to completely implode. None of them did. I've been letting them self-select since, and it works better than it ever did when I was creating teams.
One thing that we do in TBL is we build some real accountability in there, so along the way there's some checks and balances to prod those people that aren't participating well.
I tried.
Yeah. Well, I've done this pretty successfully, but I still have teams that you're going to have some teams that may do better than others. So I've had to spend a little time and go and prompt, maybe spend a little more time standing around the table of the team that wasn't discussing things as robustly. I mean, there's no foolproof, perfect way.
If you have students that withdraw, what happens to the workload distribution of the team?
I don't, because I'm dealing with seniors.
They have
That's
to.
right.
They have to finish up both of the senior level courses that I've got.
Totally different. I've done this with freshmen that where I had a variety of different kinds of students. I did groups, and what I thought worked really well was that giving everybody a job. So if you had a team of 5 people, everybody had a distinct job, and those jobs rotated. Now that was a lot of work for me to just set it up, but once I had it set up and put it on a spreadsheet for everybody to see, they knew, okay, this week it's my job to be the record keeper. This week it's my job to ask questions. And that really worked well. I mean,
Yeah.
But it wasn't self-selected in this case. It was, but I almost assume it wouldn't matter if you could do that as well with, because essentially having a job makes them accountable regardless if they're strong or not.
I wish you'd been in my lecture this week in management where I actually talk about tasks and roles and that we play in groups, because there are clearly defined tasks. But I've heard about doing that and thought about doing that myself, so that you don't have that person that always slips into the recorder role or whatnot. But you could do that in TBL. Like I said, this is very much what TBL prescribes, and it's not every collaborative or cooperative learning insists on doing this. So for me, it's worked well. We also, in our capstone project, one of the things we tell our students the very first day, in the very first class they have, is that you're going to do a lot of group work in our curriculum. I'm the only one that's using TBL, but almost every class has some form of group work. And you're going to have a chance to work with different people. So one of the things I like about my class is that they may end up working with someone they haven't worked with before. But we allow you to self-select your capstone group. So if you want a good capstone group, you better be a good team member. And sometimes we have to remind them of that over the course of 2 years. And what always happens is we have that group that no one wants to work with, those individuals. And when you put a bunch of slackers together, one of those slackers is going to have to step forward and be a leader, right? And so that happens too. So I've witnessed that in our own curriculum, but that's, like I said, it's a different class where we do
And
all
see, I
that.
find that to be the most valuable thing that I see from allowing them to self-select. Because if that group of slackers was divided up, there's still going to be slackers, and they're never
Not
going-
necessarily.
Well,
Maybe in your experience,
it's
yes.
been my experience.
My experience, not.
Okay.
Not my experience. I have been able to prod them.
So we probably made a mistake of grouping people, like letting people choose where they sat and then kind of grouping them together. And what happened was all the groups at the front are doing really well together, and then we have a couple groups at the back that are kind of falling apart. So how can we go back now and start to fix the couple of groups at the back, but keeping the ones in the
Yeah.
front that are doing so well?
That would be really interesting in terms of the research to know where students sit in the classroom, that you could have gone and just had them numbered down the row so that people in the back got mixed with people in the front. Or the first day even say, okay, I want you to move, you might even take where I sat in the class as one of your sorting criteria, if that's something that you see that phenomenon happen. I haven't looked at any research in terms of, has anybody looked at
There's
research?
a lot of research.
Yeah, so where people sit in their class.
Front row and the middle aisle.
Yeah, so there's another opportunity for sorting criteria, is based on where someone sits in a class. It's interesting.
How
So,
big are your classes?
40, give or take, yeah.
all right, so, I think once again, with everything that I'm doing, when I jumped in and did this, I just tried it, and I'm tweaking over time. But there is a lot of research, and there's more and more research coming out, especially even about the TBL. And TBL itself, a lot of it's coming out of the health sciences. There's opportunity to do research too, so that's another thing to think about. If you're going to embark in this, why not start from day one in designing some kind of study that you could then write up? We all got to publish, right? Depending on how pedagogical publishing works in your field. But there's an opportunity here. I always feel like if I'm going to put this much effort into something, I ought to be able to get a couple things out of it. I started that day one. If I was going to invest my time in teaching, I needed to figure out how I was going to turn that into scholarship as well. And it's not highly valued, but it is valued in my field. And it's certainly I want to give back, because I'm the one that wants to read that research. So why wouldn't I want to help others, learn from what I've done? So it's kind of helping each other. So then once we kind of get through all this, all of this, I've got them moving and around. I'm not just talking at them like I am with you today. I would have, if we had more time, I would have, if I had a couple of hours, I probably would have demoed all this for you. But now we do demo. We're like, okay, it's time to take the first rat. If you're not familiar with it, you take it individually using a Scantron or even just a simple markup sheet. And then after they finish that, they take it as a group. I use the if-at forms, the little scratch-off cards. And what's your first name again?
Josh.
Josh has created something on Qualtrics that is really cool. And he'll probably demo it for you, where he's got, if they get the right answer, Tiger Woods may be on there going. There are some other electronic tools out there I've been reading about. TBL group has a listserv nationally, and this is a topic that comes up a lot about the rats. Have you automated your rats? How do you do this? But my kids, they love to scratch off. Everyone, they don't, it's like gambling, right? In other states. All right. Okay, so one of the first team exercises I might use would be, we're going to weight the grades. You get a chance. Okay, so these are the instructions. This is the actual slide that I use with the class. Y'all are going to talk as a team and come to a decision about how you want the grades weighted. And then you're going to send a representative to the center of the room, and who are going to negotiate with one another, almost like the fishbowl kind of exercise, where the groups remain silent, and so these people in the middle then come together and negotiate the grade weighting. If they need to, they can step back to their group and say, well, they want to do it this, is that okay with you? And I give them some parameters based on the assignments that I have. And there are three components to your grade. You've got your individual component, You have a team component, and then we have something called the team maintenance component. And that's peer evaluation of your performance over the course of the semester. And these are the three major components. So I give them a worksheet. This is in the syllabus too, so they've already seen it. Okay. As you can see, I give them a little, I don't let them set everything, and I give some parameters. So I give them an opportunity to set where their IRAT and their individual homework and their individual, I each do an individual topic report. And you can see the parameters. They get to decide, within area how much that will count, and then they get to decide how much is the individual performance going to count, how much is the team performance, and how much is the maintenance. Nothing can be, of those three major ones, nothing can be below 10%. A lot of times they opt for the team maintenance to be 10%. I had a group that didn't. They made it higher. And then halfway through the semester, they got a little worried. But oh my gosh, but this is how we get students to perform. They're going to be graded by their team. And I'm going to talk about that process too, because I really try to take time and care about how we do that evaluation and trying to give people time to recover if they're not doing so well. So by the time we get to the end of the semester, and also I'll talk about that in a moment. But this is where we do try to work on those problems that we have with group work. It's people not doing their work. And I found some good instruments that I've borrowed and utilized in my class for doing this. So this would be one of their first chances to have some team meeting, and it's lively discussion. It's fun, and they have some ownership. They have some control over this process. Then I do a demo RAT, and I do it based on my syllabus. And I'm going to give you a copy of mine. And what I'm giving you is actually like this is the key, obviously, when you'll see it. So I've talked about my syllabus. They've had it in advance. They should have looked at it by now. They have to put it away. And I have them individually take this test. When they finish, I give them out the little IFAT forms, and they take it together. If you've not seen that done before, they yell and they scream and they jump up and down if they get it right, and they're like, yeah, all right. Or they argue over who's going to have to scratch it off because someone's afraid they'll make a mistake. It's a very simple test, right? But I want them also to see that it is going to be kind of high-level concepts and not minutia of detail on the IRATs. Okay. One idea that I've read about, I haven't done it myself, but people who've been doing this for a long time will show, as part of their orientation, will show the distribution of grades to give them assurance, to show them, hey, and this might probably good to do this after they've set their own grade weighting, I don't know, that 99.9% of the time, the group always does better than the individuals. You may have that rare occasion when you've got that one student that may do better than the group, but it's been my experience. The groups, and this is part of them learning, and there are other exercises, I haven't even used these, but there are ways for you to do all kinds of exercises where they can go ahead and come to that realization themselves that, there may be, if you've ever seen where you splashed like a bunch of logos up on a slide and you ask everybody to look at it, and then you take it off and then they write down how many logos they remember, and then you get them together and let them write how many logos they remember. Just the simple things like that, and understanding that the group as a whole has more knowledge than the individual, right? And that we all can bring things together and assist one another in getting the bigger picture. Just another idea. Dr. Google will help you find that. Okay. Finally, I want to touch on the team maintenance, the peer evaluation process. So I use a formative and a summative peer evaluation. The first time I ever did this, I did one evaluation at the end. And what I found, they had just completed a major project. Their peer evaluation focused on that major project. Bad mistake on my part. Even though I had talked to them about this is about the whole semester, but they really focused in like it was just an evaluation of their group project. Okay, so I went back to the drawing board and I found another idea of doing something midpoint that was kind of low stakes, and you can decide to count it toward the grade or not. where they give both quantitative and qualitative feedback to their peers. And then I, in turn, review those, and I give the person who gave the feedback on the quality of the feedback they gave. I've got this for you, I think, in here somewhere. Okay, I do. I'm going to find it. I have a copy of this for you where it shows. It's on my desk. I'm going to have it, I'll have it posted for you. It's a great instrument, a gentleman named Coles. And they have there's a rubric where they can check off, on some criteria and rate their fellow students. And then you give them instruction on how to, I've got it right here, how to, then you ask them to give this feedback. What is the single most valuable contribution this person makes to your team? And then number 2, what is the single most important way this person could alter their behavior to more effectively help your team? But I don't just give them this form. I also give them some instruction on how to give good feedback, about describing specific behaviors, not being non-specific, about clearly, and make sure it's constructive and helpful. So, and then I use this same criteria that I've demonstrated to them to grade there. So if you want to grade this, you want them to be serious about it, make it be graded. What I've seen here is that you're doing 2 things. You're teaching people to give feedback. And once again, you're modeling a skill that they're going to need to be able to do. They are going to supervise somebody someday, or they're going to be a peer reviewer. So I look for opportunities to teach people how to review. How many of you just knew how to do peer review the moment that you got into your doctoral program? Right? So teaching people how to give feedback. But it also gives people a chance to recover. So I've seen 2 things happen. I've seen the person that was not prepared, missed some classes, have that brought to their attention in a constructive way. The single most helpful thing we could do is if you would be better prepared for the IRAT. We notice that you're never prepared. But it also can give them, but you start, you lead with the carrot and you come in with the very soft stick. That person will step up their game, hopefully, because they realize, you might weight this one a little lower and know that you're going to have this other evaluation at the end of the semester that's purely quantitative, that's going to be a little higher rated. But I've also seen where you've got that really smart leader who is always taking leadership, and not listening to others. And they'll say, we appreciate your leadership, and you're a natural born leader, and you are always so well prepared, but we feel like you don't listen to us. You always dismiss what we have to say. So it works both ways, and I've seen that person go, oh, it was done in a nice way, and I watched them back off and start listening a little bit more. So this, and I'm so sorry I didn't, that the copy's not with me, but so I use that as the formative. And then when I come to the end of the semester, I have something where they actually distribute it's pretty simple. They distribute points among their team members, and everyone can't have the same amount of points. Yes.
Do you ask them to refer back to their team expectations at all at any point in this process, to go back and say, here's what you looked at and you agreed on as a team?
I probably do, because they would have opened the folder with this form in it, kind of thing. But yeah, so I'm constantly going back to that. But one of the most important things, I think, is teaching people how to give that feedback and to think about it being specific. I'm using that, and I'm doing another exercise in another class with writing right now about peer review, and then also having the person who reviewed let that person know, well, this wasn't very helpful to me, or this comment was helpful. So it's that same sort of, so you might even add that in, let the peer who got the feedback give feedback. There are a lot of ways you could do that. I just think these are just important other skill sets, but it helps them. I do like that it keeps them focused that you're being evaluated over the course of the semester. You're not being evaluated on the last project you worked on together.
So with those points you were saying they can't give everyone the same amount, are you
Yeah.
saying like you have them rank their teammates?
Well, what I've done, and there are different ways of doing this, and what I chose to do, and this is, a lot of this is on the TBL website, and people will share, well, this is how I do it. So let's say I've got a team of 5. So I have 40 points to distribute among those other 4 members. One of them at least has to get a 9 or less, and one of them has to get 11 or more. I can't just give 4 10s. And then they'll say, well, can I use fractions? You know, you get to decide all that. I've only, in the time I've been doing this, had one team, and it was after I implemented this formative, they collaborated on how they were going to distribute the points so that each of them would end up with the same number of points. They were that good of a team. But for one of their people emailed me and said, I don't feel comfortable with this, because she was going to have to give high points to someone that she would have rated lower. You know, so that was an interesting phenomenon. That's the first time that happened. And usually they're all staying in that 9 to 11 range, but I had one time, I mean, they obviously had some problems in their team, and she gave a couple people, you know, like 7s or 5s. It really threw their grade down. That was when I wasn't using the one midway too. So that, like I said, I've learned by mistake along the way. But this is how we help try to alleviate some of those problems of group work that we've seen. And we try to help those slackers do what they need to do. All right, we have one more PDS. We're going to talk about building application exercises. That'll be in November. The Team-Based Collaborative is a great website. You can be a member. I think the Big EO Center has a membership. You can inquire about that. I have personal membership because they have a lot of just general information, but then they also have a firewall with some members-only information that's great. There are books out there. There's more and more research that's becoming available. There's a conference in March in Albuquerque. I went last year. It was in St. Pete. This is a very giving group, I found. People love TBL, and they're very sharing of the materials and their ideas. And like I said, it's all kinds of disciplines. People will share application exercises they've developed. You know, I'm in a discipline that's not used as widely, so I'm at a disadvantage. I don't know what all disciplines you're in, but you know, I have been able to go and hunt and find, because creating materials is difficult and time consuming. That's why we're going to spend time on application exercises next time. And I am available, Kathleen Irwin, C. Irwin at auburn.edu, if I can answer any questions. And I'll get that other instrument to Diane so it could get posted and you can maybe download it, or she can email it out to you, or I can at least direct you to it. I just got it through the TBL website myself. Like I said, people are very generous and they share and they gladly distribute. So, any other questions? Guess that's it. Thank you all for coming. This has been a great fun hour.